Okay, Anova. Anova. It stands for Analysis of Variance, but they just use the word Anova. Okay, so this is the most depressing thing that'll happen all semester. I went on Weather Underground, and I got the average temperature for June 21st for every year for like the past 50 years, maybe 60 years. Okay, so this is 1960, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, like that. And then this is 1970, 1980. Okay, it's June 21st every single time. So if we're looking for global warming, I mean, is this set of numbers really any different? Are the 60s the same as the 70s, or is it really all that different? I mean, there's a few 70-something degrees in the 70s, and there's none of that in the 60s. Is that enough? Maybe it's just fluctuations, because we get into the 80s and it's all down in the 60s again. Okay, analysis of variance takes the numbers in little lists and decides whether or not one list is particularly any different from a different list. Okay, so I'm starting to look down here in the 2010s. There's a bunch of 70s. There's even a 92. They didn't used to have those sorts of numbers. Okay, so maybe something's different. An analysis of variance will check for that. All right, so anyway, what you do, and these lists don't have to be the same length. I could have come up with a list for the 2020s, but it would only had one on there. You can do it that way. They can all have different amounts in them if you want. But so first thing I do is I take the 1960s, and that I'm going with, that's list 1. Okay, so I go into Stat, Edit, and then in list 1, I start putting those numbers in. Okay, so I'm like 68, enter, 64, enter, 64. So I make list 1 into the 10 numbers from the 1960s. And then the 1970s, I do list 2, 1980s, I do list 3, 1990s, I do list 4. And the 2000s, I do list 5. And the 2010s, I do list 6. Okay, so I haven't done anything yet except for put all those numbers in my calculator. All right, so now I go Stat, Tests, Anova. You've probably buzzed past it while you were going through the tests, and it opens some parentheses. And then I use the actual L1 button. It's like a second function above the regular 1. And I get L1. And then I put that comma from the comma button. L2, L3, L4. Now, if I quit at L4, I've done everything through the year 1999. All right. And if I quit right there and hit Enter, it comes back with a p-value of 0.145. So it's kind of working a lot like goodness of fit. Are all those essentially the same, or is there something different? There's a 14.5% chance that those numbers, those listed numbers from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s are all essentially the same list as each other, except for minor little differences. Okay, 14.5%, I'm going to let that slide. How about if I do same thing, Stat, Tests, Anova, list 1, list 2, list 3, list 4, list 5. So now I'm looking at all the way through 2009. Okay, I get P is 0.005. Oh, okay, that's the percent chance that there's nothing going on in those lists. By the time you include things after the year 2000, there is something going on those lists. Something is different now. Those lists are not the same as they used to be. And if I throw in the teens, P is 0.00137. Okay, it's just getting worse. All right, there is definitely something different starting in the year 2000 where things just suddenly get started. You know, I never see any 60s anymore. It's all in the 70s, and in 92, it wasn't anything like that in 1960. Okay, so not only is it different, but the numbers are definitely higher. So that's the depressing end of the semester.